The files also revealed just how close Margaret Thatcher was to Jimmy Savile during her leadership. He declared his love for the Prime Minister in a handwritten note from the 1980s as he tried to enlist support for his work at Stoke Mandeville Hospital, a place where Savile is now known to have abused vulnerable people. Sky's Richard Suchet reports.
Jimmy Savile's name opened many doors.
Hello, welcome. Come in.
I must introduce
In 1977, he persuaded Margaret Thatcher, then leader of the opposition, to make an appearance on Jim'll Fix It. It wasn't long until his powerful friend became Prime Minister.
Might I ask you to just hand them one each and then...
Of course.
But today we learn more about their relationship. Confidential government records have been released to the National Archives in West London under the 30-year rule. In this letter, Savile thanks Thatcher for inviting him to lunch at number 10, where they discussed a possible government donation to one of his fundraising causes. My girl patients pretended to be madly jealous, he joked. What these files show is that Jimmy Savile had a line of communication with Margaret Thatcher and ultimately secured a donation to Stoke Mandeville Hospital. But what they also reveal is that Mrs. Thatcher and the people around her were completely oblivious to what else was going on. But that's not to say they weren't politically savvy. Asked whether she'd agreed to appear for a second time on Jim'll Fix It, she scrawled, "No." In December 1981, it was decided the government would give £500,000 to the Stoke Mandeville appeal. The cheque was presented by the Secretary of State for Social Services, Norman Fowler. The hospital is one of a series of places where Savile preyed on vulnerable people over the course of decades. He and Thatcher crossed paths many times, but the documents released today suggest that she, like most others, only knew him for his seemingly tireless charitable work. Richard Suchet, Sky News.
Well, joining us now from Taunton in Somerset is the Daily Telegraph's former political editor, George Jones. And the irony of this is, if these files had been released a couple of years ago, we wouldn't be interested in this letter from Jimmy Savile. But it's really chilling reading it now, isn't it?
Well, it is, but of course you've got to look, you're looking at that with hindsight now. I mean, back in those days, Jimmy Savile was, I think, something of a national treasure. And I think from Margaret Thatcher's point of view, he was an outsider, a bit like her. He was a sort of chippy northerner who'd worked his way up against the establishment. She was the grocer's daughter from Grantham, and she was always being put upon for those sort of working class, middle class links. So I think possibly there was that sort of bond. And don't forget also, Jimmy Savile was probably one of the few people who worked for the BBC who actually probably supported her.
More than supported her, it seems like he's being completely sycophantic.
Well, he was, but Margaret Thatcher was very susceptible to flattery, and she did use her sort of feminine wiles, whether it was on international statesmen like Mr. Gorbachev or Ronald Reagan, President Mitterrand of France. If you remember, President Mitterrand said, I think was it, she had the lips of Marilyn Monroe and the eyes of Caligula. Jimmy Savile flattered her. But, you know, there he was a regular person on television. And Margaret Thatcher was savvy enough as a politician to know, you know, that she wanted to be able to reach a wider audience. Tony Blair, for example, you know, followed on later, would always appear on breakfast television rather than on the Today programme. So Margaret Thatcher, I think, knew that Jimmy Savile could probably reach parts of the audience that the Tories normally wouldn't get to.